All right, good morning, everyone. It's 10 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I am Katie Preston, the Title IV Director and State Coordinator for Homeless Education on the CFP team. And today we are going to be talking about Title IV. So let's right into it. For the presentation today, please just mute your microphone and turn off your webcam. If you have questions, just go ahead and ask them in the chat box, and one of my teammates will let me know what the questions are. I can't see them on the screen, so go ahead and put them in there. And all of these sessions will be recorded and posted to the website. Today's PowerPoint presentation, I believe, is already up, so if you want to go ahead and look at slides, that's fine. Also, on our website, we have like I said, the PowerPoint presentations are up there. Also for this presentation, the allowable uses document is posted, and any other resources and guidance that we've provided for the other presentations we've done over the last 2 weeks are also there. All right, so for today, we are going to be talking about Title IV. My hope is just to give you kind of an overview of the program, its requirements, hoping you'll walk away with a better understanding of those requirements, and also how I'll be reviewing applications. So we'll talk, like I said, an overview of the program, go through some of the allowable uses, talk about budgeting requirements, talk a little bit about school-wide programs, and then writing Title IV investment. So Title IV, the purpose of this program is to improve students' academic achievement by increasing the capacity for providing all students with a well-rounded education, improving school conditions for student learning, and promoting the effective use of technology. I've kind of underlined here the three sort of content area names. You'll hear me refer to them as well-rounded, safe and healthy, and effective use of technology. And that's what I'll call them throughout this presentation. Title IV is a pretty cool program. It's got a lot of flexibility, within each content area, but also between the content areas. And it really, through the use of the comprehensive needs assessment, allows LEAs to tailor investments based on the unique needs of their LEA and their student population. So I'm hoping that you'll see that even though, yes, we're going to talk about requirements, we're also going to talk a lot about the flexibility that comes with this program. Okay, so jump right into the requirements here. We'll go through supplement, not supplant, prioritizing high need schools, your comprehensive needs assessment, and then ensuring that you have a signature from a parent or guardian for mental health. I wanted to particularly draw attention to this one just because I know you're all familiar with supplement, not supplant, but just pointing out that it is different from the Title I requirement. So, any proposed use of funds for an activity needs to supplement and not supplant other state or local funds that would be otherwise used to pay for that activity. So we have two presumptions of supplanting: an activity that is required by federal, state, or local law, or an activity that was paid for with state or local funds in the prior year. And I think this is especially important with regard to that well-rounded content area, because activities, funded by Title IV need to be above and beyond what's required, and they need to really enrich the content or curriculum. Going into prioritizing distribution of funds, another requirement for Title IV. So LEAs need to prioritize their schools based on one or more of these factors. And those factors are schools with the greatest need, schools with the highest number of students from low-income families, schools identified for comprehensive support and improvement under Title I, schools implementing equity support and improvement plans, or schools identified as persistently dangerous. So again, one or more of these, and that top one schools with the greatest need, that's determined by the LEA. So that's likely going to be driven mostly by your comprehensive needs. All right, let's talk about the comprehensive needs assessment. So this is a really important and of course required step for Title IV. It's particularly important, like I said before, because it's really what's going to allow some of that flexibility within the program and between those content areas. So an LEA that receives at least $30,000 in Title IV funds, and that's your allocation, not unconsolidated. So your total allocation over $30,000 must conduct a comprehensive needs assessment. So it needs to examine areas for improvement related to those three content areas: well-rounded, safe and healthy, and effective use of technology. You need to engage stakeholders and then look at relevant data to understand student and school needs. And lastly, the parent signature. So just ensuring that anytime that you're funding a mental health assessment or service with Title IV, you are also getting prior written informed consent from the parent of any child who's under 18. Okay. So what can you do with Title IV funds? We do have a new allowable uses document. It's posted on our website, and it's also there's a link in GMS, so I encourage you to take a look at that. Under each of those three content areas, well-rounded, safe and healthy, and effective use of technology, allowable uses can include direct services, professional development, salaries of personnel to carry out identified programs and services, and resources and equipment. We'll go through each of those content areas a little bit more specifically, talk about the purpose of them, and then some of the allowable uses. For well-rounded, the purpose here is really, increasing access to a well-rounded education. So providing that enriched curriculum, diverse learning experiences for all students, that's going to ensure a more holistic educational experience. So I've taken just a handful of some examples from the allowable uses document. You may have things around engaging students in STEM, accelerated learning programs, college and career counseling, social emotional learning, excuse me, and many, many other programs and activities that, again, really support that sort of holistic education. I just want to also point out that, I don't have subjects like math and literacy necessarily listed here. That doesn't mean that you can't fund any math or literacy or, science activities with Title IV. A well-rounded education really needs to engage students across a variety of subjects. And that, of course, includes math, literacy, science, and many, many others. So the important questions here are going to be, how is that activity really enriching the curriculum or adding additional supports to ensure success for all students? How is it going above and beyond what's required? And of course, how is it supported in your data? I also want to talk a little bit about infrastructure on this slide. We'll talk more in depth about that when I get to the effective use of technology allowable uses. But just want to point out that there is no 15% special rule for well-rounded. So for those of you who aren't familiar with this, under the effective use of technology content area, there's a maximum cap on infrastructure that you can spend. That's not the case in either well-rounded or safe and healthy. So there may be space here for flexibility around infrastructure that supports this intent, a well-rounded educational opportunity. Of course, it's going to always depend on the wording of your investment and the data that you're using to support it. But an example here could be, I got an investment that was for a software platform that supports equitable access to post-secondary opportunities, and helps students align college and career interests and goals. It's a software platform, so might automatically think, oh, that's infrastructure. But I think there's a strong case to be made there, depending on the wording of the investment and the data used to support it, that in fact that falls under well-rounded. And so then that 15% rule would drop away if it's under the well-rounded category. And that, just like I said, it opens up a little more flexibility in your spending. Okay. Move into safe and healthy. Purpose here, of course, providing or improving school conditions for student learning kind of falls into two categories of safe and supportive schools, so the actual learning environment, and then student physical and mental health. Again, a handful of examples here, and many more listed in the actual document, but any program and activity that fosters a safe, healthy, supportive, and drug-free school environment. And then lastly, effective use of technology. The purpose of this content area is really to improve how technology is used in the classroom to increase student academic achievement. So we're focused on improving the practice, and expanding those growth and learning opportunities through the use of technology, and then building capacity for blended learning opportunities. The majority of this content area, spending in this content area, needs to be to support professional development activities, and other activities that are directly related to improving how educational technology is used, right? So in order for technology to be really effective in the classroom, educators need to have the knowledge and skills to take full advantage of it. So most of the spending here really needs to be around training and professional development. Okay, and then again, with that 15% rule, this is only true in this content area in effective use of technology. But there is a 15% cap on infrastructure spending. So that's 15% of your total budgeted amount in effective use of technology can go towards things like devices, equipment, software applications, platforms, digital instructional resources, other one-time IT purchases, and things that are needed, infrastructure needed to address readiness shortfalls.
Katie, I have a couple of questions. Is now a good time?
Sure.
All right. So, should I be thinking of social emotional learning activities as being under well-rounded, not safe and healthy schools? Safe and healthy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, excuse me. I think it typically does fall under well-rounded. That's where the feds have put it. That's where I've seen guidance for it. I mean, I think you could certainly make the case that it could easily go under either. And again, it's probably going to depend on your needs and also the way you write that investment. I don't know if that answers that question.
Okay, and I have one more if you're ready.
Sure. Yeah.
Due to COVID-19 closures, we know that many students will need additional social, emotional, and mental health supports for FY21.
Mm-hmm.
But we may not have actual data. What could we use for data to support this? The number of days we were closed, for instance, or do you suggest something else?
That's a really good question. I don't know that I have an answer for that right off the top of my head. So yeah, that's probably something that we're going to have to talk about, because you're certainly not going to be alone in that boat. yeah, I think we'll probably have to think on it as a team. Because
Katie,
certainly, yeah,
Hi, can I jump in? I'm sorry to
please
interrupt you.
do, yes.
So to this person and others who have a similar question, just a reminder that both your data inventories and your continuous improvement plans are living documents. You have opportunities to update those as more data becomes available. So as you, launch into the next school year, if you still have funds that haven't been committed to investments, you may continue to collect data, and the data may reveal itself very quickly in light of the present circumstances in August and September. You can go back and make updates to your data inventory or to your continuous improvement plan, and then write investments accordingly.
Thanks, Jesse. Should I move on, Karen?
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay. Okay. So again, here, just a handful of allowable uses from that document for both non-infrastructure and infrastructure under effective use of technology. So activities, of course, professional development around using technology effectively in the classroom, and then programs and activities that are going to support digital literacy, citizenship, personalized learning and blended learning, and then, of course, your infrastructure, which we talked about. Okay, so now you know what you can spend it on, but how much can you spend and how much do you have to spend? Title IV is a bit of an enigma here in that it has these budgeting requirements, which can be challenging. Okay, so if an LEA receives more than $30,000 in unconsolidated Title IV funds, the LEA needs to meet all three of the budgeting requirements. So that's 20%, at least 20% in well-rounded, at least 20% in safe and healthy, and a portion of the allocation, so up to 60% in effective use of technology. And you'll often hear us refer to this as 20/20 and a portion of. So that's what we're talking about when we say that kind of offhand. If your LEA receives less than $30,000 in unconsolidated Title IV funds, you only have to meet one of these budgeting requirements. And I'll just draw your attention to the unconsolidated piece. So that's applicable if your allocation is less than $30,000, but also if you operate a school-wide program and you consolidate Title IV funds into your school-wide, and if you consolidate enough into your school-wide that your Title IV funds drop below $30,000, then you would also only need to meet one of these budgeting requirements. Just making sure we don't have any questions on that.
Nope, you're good at this time.
Okay, great. All right, so let's just walk through this sort of, we changed this in GMS a little bit, and I know that Karen talked about it, but I'll just walk through it again to make sure we're all clear on how this works and how it will hopefully be helpful for you. This is, of course, an entirely made up example here, but let's say, for example, you have $2 million in Title IV, and in this example, you're consolidating 40,000 of that into your school-wide. So that total at the bottom is how much you're working with in your Title IV funds. So in this first column, I don't think anything's changed here from last year. You'll see the, excuse me, the 20% for well-rounded and safe and healthy, and those grade in boxes will fill in automatically for you. And then, of course, a portion of for your effective use of technology. In the second column, you'll see the maximum amount for effective use of technology, so that's 60%. And then in this third column, this is the only place you have to actually fill in a number in this table. You're going to put in the budgeted amount for effective use of technology. And then based on what you put in here, the system will calculate for you the maximum 15% that you can spend on infrastructure. I want to just point out here that when I review investments and budgeting requirements, I only look at the grade in boxes. So you can and should put into that white box for effective use of technology the planned, your planned budget there. But when I review these, I go through the investment description tab and add up everything that you have for those 3 content areas. And then I come back to this table and I compare them to those grade-in boxes. So that's how I'm determining whether or not you're meeting that 2020 portion of, and then the maximum 15%. This table is really, I hope, is going to be a helpful tool for you. I hope we've made it easier. I know that it caused some headaches last year, so I hope this is going to be an improvement. But of course, feedback is welcome. Do we have any questions on that?
Sorry about that. No, we're good
That's
at this
okay.
time. Thank you.
Okay, great. Good. All right, so talk very briefly about school-wide. If you consolidate Title IV funds into your school-wide program, you must have at least one school-wide investment that meets the intent of Title IV at each school where Title IV has been pooled. I've put together this very nice table here, very simple example of just what I'm talking about. So let's say you have 3 schools, Apple, Banana, and Cherry, and you've pooled Title IV at Apple and Banana, but not Cherry. I will be looking for an SWP investment that meets the intent of Title IV at Apple and Banana. I will not be looking for one at Cherry. So just want to be very clear. If you've pooled Title IV at those schools, you need to have at least one SWP investment that meets the intent of Title IV at those schools. Okay, so also sort of going back to what we were talking about before with the less than 30,000, Title IV funds that have been consolidated into a school-wide program lose their identity. So meaning that school-wide investments that meet the intent of Title IV are no longer subject to those Title IV budgeting requirements. And then also investments that meet the intent of Title IV in your school-wide do not count toward budgeting requirements in Title IV. So those are 2 very separate pools of money. Yes, you have a question?
Oh, sorry, I was unmuted. I apologize. I was clearing
that's
my
okay.
throat.
I just thought you were.
We had a question, but this slide actually just answered that question. So I think you've covered it. Thank you.
Okay. Great. And I just want to point out, Christine did a great presentation on some of the benefits of consolidating into your school-wide. So if you haven't had a chance, certainly take a look at that. Okay. So now hopefully you have a better sense of actually how you can spend, how much money you have to spend. How are you going to get your investments approved? If you haven't had a chance already, please take a look at Megan's PowerPoint on writing an approvable investment. She included a ton of really great information on what we're going to be looking for. But very, very briefly here, we're looking at, is it allowable, right? Is it supplement for Title IV especially, but is it supplemental to the basic education program? Is it going above and beyond? Does it meet the intent of Title IV? Please take a look at that allowable uses document. Is it necessary? So is it supported by data that represents a clear need? Is it reasonable? And here's where you're going to want to provide details for us. And again, please take a look at Megan's PowerPoint. It goes into much more detail about all of this, but just wanted to give it a quick going over. So when you're writing your investments, it needs to have a purpose. What is the need that you're actually trying to meet? With Title IV, this needs to be more specific than stating one of the 3 content areas. So what's the actual purpose of the activity that you're going to implement? Not in order to provide a well-rounded education, but an actual purpose to the activity. So for example, in order to promote student knowledge of and interest in post-secondary opportunities, we will ... And then, of course, follow that up with an activity that you're going to implement to meet that need. Okay, so how can you make it clear which intent you're trying to meet, which of those content areas you are actually intending this investment to fall under, and why is that important? I guess I'll answer that second question first. It's important because going back to those budgeting requirements, you know, sometimes it's challenging to follow thinking on which content area you're actually putting an investment under. And so if I am guessing that you mean well-rounded when in fact you meant effective use of technology, it's possible that I'm going to send something back to you and say, hey, you haven't met your well-rounded budgeting requirement. And some of you have experienced this back and forth where you're saying, yes, we did. That's what this investment is. So just making it clear in those investments where you're intending those investments to fall. Have some examples, some ideas for you. Certainly not a requirement, but again, possibly could eliminate some of that back and forth. So first, you can sort of tag your investment as simple as putting in some initials there, WR for well-rounded, SH for safe and healthy, effective use of technology, can shorten to EUT. That tells me right off the bat exactly where you're planning that investment to fall. And then when I'm looking through your data, I also know where I'm looking to see if it's supported there. So here in this example, you know, I've just added in an EUT at the beginning to the investment. Second, you can write in both the content area or the intent and the purpose into the description. So in this example, you know, it says to provide a safe and healthy learning environment. Okay, I know exactly what content area that's supposed to go in. And then the purpose, continuing on by reducing exclusionary discipline and promoting supportive school discipline, etc. And then lastly, and this would maybe be a little bit more work for you, but certainly if you have a lot of investments, could be really helpful. Just upload additional documentation. It could be as simple as an Excel spreadsheet with the number, the investment number, a couple quick words to, you know, describe what it is, and then the category. And this has been helpful, certainly when I've had some back and forth with LEAs around this. Then I can actually edit this and say, and send it back to you and say, well, here's where I think this fits in better here with your wording and with the data that you have. So just another possibility. All right. So just to wrap up that little section, you know, provide a clear purpose and activity in your investment. Ensure that the investment is allowable, reasonable, and necessary. So checking the allowable uses document, supporting things with data, and providing plenty of details, and then including information around the intended content area if you feel that's necessary. And of course, please reach out with questions. And wow, this was very short. But in closing, thank you so much for your patience. I recognize that, you know, as I moved into this position and was able to kind of dig in a little deeper into some of the requirements, it caused, you know, some challenges around some of the applications, things that were previously approved that maybe were brought into question. I know that affected some of you more than others, and I'm really, really appreciative of everyone's flexibility and patience and willingness to work through those situations. So I hope that this presentation has given you some idea of, you know, how I'll be viewing things going forward. And in light of what we've covered today, please don't hesitate to reach out with questions, especially as you begin to work on your 21 applications. My email is there. And if we have questions, I would be happy to try to answer them.
So Katie, we're getting some thank yous. We're not
Okay.
getting any questions. I just put out another queue to see if anyone had any at this time. So
Okay.
let's just give it a second since we're ahead of schedule.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that was really quick.
Well, you're getting all kinds of thank yous, so,
Great. I hope it was helpful.
and they're happy that you've joined our team.
Oh, thank you. Me too.
The only question that I have right now, we'll handle offline.
Okay.
So I think oh, no, that's a question for me. I apologize. Okay.
Okay.
So,
Well, I mean, obviously, if there are more questions, just email.
can you
please.
go back a slide to put up your email again, just so people
Yes, I
have
can.
that? Great. Okay. I think we're good then. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
And we'll talk with you all soon.